So out of anything you could possibly do for your health, fasting and intermittent fasting are the most important things you can do. There's nothing else that even comes close in creating more health. Now, on the flip side, snacking and continued eating is the worst thing you can do for your health. So today I'm going to show you the basics of how to do intermittent fasting. Actually, it's not necessarily just for the beginners, it's for advanced people too, because I found that if you're running into a plateau or things aren't going as smooth, you need to go back to the basics. All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes of fasting. Well, we probably shouldn't talk about potatoes. How about the meat and cauliflower of fasting? What we're trying to do is we're trying to go from sugar burning to fat burning. A big confusion that a lot of people have when they're fasting is they think their body is starving. They think it's not eating. But in reality, your body is eating when it's not eating. It's finally eating its own fat. That is why the best indicator to know that it's working is your appetite gone, okay? If your appetite is going away and you don't have any more appetite and you're not hungry anymore, guess what? It's working. And it makes it a lot easier to stick to if you don't have an appetite. So the principle that I've talked about in other videos is you have to get healthy to lose weight, not lose weight to get healthy. That means that we're not necessarily focused on weight loss. Weight loss will come after you get healthy. But a better indicator for success is your ability to fast comfortably because you're not hungry. Like right now, it's 12 o'clock noon. I haven't eaten since yesterday at about 6:30. Am I hungry? I'm not hungry. I am absolutely not interested in any food at all. I don't want to eat anything right now. The first meal that I have will be roughly about 3:30 today. And even then, I could probably fast longer just because I've been doing it for a long time. But you want to get into a condition where the food is no longer controlling you. You're controlling your food. So many people are into this situation where the food is literally controlling their life and it's destroying their life. All right, so the first thing you need to do is skip breakfast, okay? Or start to push your breakfast further towards lunch, okay? So when you wake up in the morning, ask yourself, are you really hungry? Or are you just eating out of habit? Chances are you're not going to be hungry for breakfast. So don't eat. So the rule of thumb is don't eat if you're not hungry, okay? Now to help you not be hungry for breakfast, you have to make sure that you keep your carbs down for your lunch and your dinner, because if you have carbs in your lunch or your dinner, guess what? The next day, you're going to be hungry in the morning. But if you keep your carbs low, and I'm talking about roughly about maybe 20 grams, maybe 30 grams, then you're not going to be hungry in the morning. The other thing that you can do is you can also do the bulletproof coffee. You can add either butter to your coffee or MCT oil. Butter is very satisfying, and MCT oil will turn into ketones, so it's going to be a lot easier to go all the way up until your first meal at noon. So depending on if you drink coffee or not, if you don't drink coffee, just do a tablespoon of MCT oil. That's a type of extract from coconut oil that turns into ketones very, very fast. So the other thing you have to realize is that all these hormones are on rhythms or waves, okay? And the cortisol hormone peaks at 8 o'clock in the morning. So you may find that you're hungry in the morning because of a cortisol spike, but you're not really hungry. It's just a hormonal shift and a sensation that you get. So the next thing I'm going to recommend is if you have this minor hungry feeling, just ignore it. Ignore the hunger. 9 times out of 10, it will go away, okay? And that's just because there's certain hormonal shifts happening in the body that are creating that sensation, but just ignore it. Now, if you ignore it and it doesn't go away and you feel dizzy, tired, weak, then you need to eat. But you really need to be able to tell the difference between hunger and time to eat. But realize as you start doing this, it's going to get easier and you won't have any hunger in the morning unless you consume carbohydrates. All right, the next little thing I'm going to say is at this first meal, make sure you add some fat at the end of the meal. That can be pecans or olives or some nut butter. It could be peanut butter. It could be brie cheese. could be fatty meat, could be any of those. Why do you want to add fat? Because when you start doing intermittent fasting, you haven't adapted yet. And so you need the fat to help you go longer, to feel satisfied, so you can fast longer. Because the fasting itself and the combination of low carbs is really what's going to help you start to adapt to this new machine in your cells that's burning fat. So the same thing with dinner. You want to add fat at the end of the meal. Now, the next point I want to bring up is this whole thing about healthy keto. Okay, what is healthy keto? Well, healthy keto is not just going on a low carb, it's using quality foods that are higher in nutrients. Because the last thing you want to do is end up looking like a crackhead. And I'm being very sarcastic, but some people, when they lose weight, they sort of look very unhealthy. Their hair is dried out. They look older. We want you to look good as you do the ketogenic diet and look younger, okay? Have that healthy glow. So that's a combination of low carb, fasting, and just healthier ingredients. So there's such a thing as dirty keto, where you're not paying attention to the quality and you're eating at a fast food restaurant or fast food. And yeah, it's low carb because you're not eating the bun, but it's very, very low quality food. Don't recommend that. All right, so this first meal and second meal is called your eating window, okay? So let's just pretend your first meal is at noon and your second meal is at 6 o'clock. So that would be roughly a 6-hour eating window. Now, when you first start out, you could potentially eat during this window through here, okay? Have a snack if you want, but I would recommend or challenge you to not do that, because that way we get some fasting between these meals too, and that will help you. The snacking is the biggest killer for progress, because the snack stimulates insulin. Every time you eat, you stimulate this thing called insulin, and what we're trying to do is fix insulin resistance, which was created by a high level of insulin for a long period of time, which comes from constant eating and eating a lot of carbohydrates. Now, if you do a 6-hour eating window, that gives you an 18-hour fasting cycle. That's pretty good. If you could do 18 hours of fasting, you're going to see some amazing results, especially with your brain. You're going to grow new brain cells. And so your cognitive function, your focus, your memory, your ability to keep your attention, your creativity, all is going to improve, as well as your mood. You're going to be happier. If you were depressed, you're going to feel much, much better just because your brain is healing. Plus, your immune system is going to get stronger. You actually grow new immune stem cells in your bone marrow, which is really cool. Inflammation goes way down, and you start getting rejuvenated. You start healing faster. All sorts of amazing things happen. All right, so now here's another problem we need to resolve at night, okay? I know this might be hard to believe, but there are some people out there that have a hard time not snacking at night. Now, we're not talking about you. You probably know people or friends or family members, but this snacking at night has to go. It's called grazing. I was a professional snacker at night. I would basically, after dinner, eat constantly until I went to bed. It was constantly putting things in my mouth. And, nuts, apples, chips, you name it, that was me. So popcorn, oh my gosh. And that's very, very bad. So we want to get rid of the snacking. How do we do it? Well, we use what's called self-discipline. We have to make sure we don't buy any snacks anymore, so they're not available to us. You want to stay busy, because if you're idle and just sitting there, maybe watching TV, it's going to be more difficult. But I really think that what's going to help you is this dinner, making sure that you have a very big dinner with this fat. So you're actually really full and you don't feel the need for any additional things. But just realize, if you're like me and everyone else, you probably have insulin resistance, which means you can't absorb nutrients as well as you should. So even though you eat and you're full, you might not feel satisfied. There's a difference. Feeling satisfied is going to happen once the insulin resistance goes away, and especially if you're eating a lot of nutrient-dense foods. There are some things that you can do that will also improve that 1 point. Apple cider vinegar, okay? Maybe a tablespoon in your water for dinner. Apple cider vinegar has acetic acid. The biggest benefit of acetic acid is to make insulin more sensitive to help your blood sugars. So it's going to actually help you reduce insulin. That's why it can help you lose weight, but it'll also help your appetite. It'll help actually insulin work better so you absorb more nutrients and you'll be less hungry. So apple cider vinegar in your water is really good. I would also, while you're at it, add some lemon to your water, lemon juice, okay? Maybe a teaspoon, maybe a half of a lemon, maybe a whole lemon. This way you can have things like vitamin C if it's fresh, or citric acid that can help reduce kidney stones and if you're at risk for gout, because sometimes when you're doing fasting, your uric acid goes up, which acts as an antioxidant, but it can flare up gout. So just add the lemon and apple cider vinegar in your water when you drink this for dinner. Another suggestion are these things called vegetables, okay? I highly recommend you consume more vegetables. And I'm talking about like a big salad. I will do my big salad either in the first meal or the second meal. Now, my meal is actually about right here. So I might eat at 3 and then at 6. So I have a very, very short eating window. It's hard for me to eat all the calories in one meal, so I spread it out within like maybe 3, maybe 4 hours. But that's just me. I just want to focus right now on not necessarily going beyond this 18 and 6, but let's say you're eating at 12 and 6. To make it easy, you can add a salad right here and a salad right here, or you can just have a very big salad. The salad that you eat should be eaten in the beginning of the meal. Why? Because if you eat the protein first, I have found that the chances of you eating that salad are going to be slim to none because you're now filled up with the protein. So I always recommend eat the salad first and then eat your protein and fat second. It seems to work, but again, that's just a minor point. Now, why do we need the salad? Well, it's going to give you more potassium and magnesium, which is going to help that insulin problem I talked about. Also, it's going to give you energy. Also, it's going to prevent cramping in your legs, and it's going to prevent keto fatigue, etc., etc. The fiber in the vegetables feeds the microbes, and that's what the microbes live on. So you're feeding your microbes, they get to eat something, and then what they do is they change it into a type of fat, which actually is really good for your blood sugars. So I found that if I don't consume large salads, that I don't feel quite right. In fact, it's harder to get into keto, and it's not going to go as smooth. Also, the vegetables are really good for your liver, and you're just going to feel cleaner if you do that. And you can switch it out. You can have just vegetables, okay, sometime, or just a salad other time. If you do the vegetables, you don't need the quantity. You don't need 10 cups of like broccoli, right? So you do smaller, maybe half the amount. And then for salad, because it's not as dense, you can have more of that. The salads, the apple cider vinegar, eating more fat at the end of the meal is going to help you avoid this snacking. Now, I want to just mention something about cholesterol because this question keeps coming up over and over and over and over again. What happens if my cholesterol goes up? It happens with a percentage of the population. Usually it goes down, but in some people it goes up, like my wife. And people are concerned. They go to the doctor and like, oh my gosh, my cholesterol is high because I'm eating all this fat. Well, if you really understand what's happening, it's not going to be that scary because when you burn fat, a certain portion of that fat is cholesterol. So it's composed of triglycerides, which you use for energy, but also cholesterol, which you don't use for energy. You don't burn cholesterol. So the cholesterol in the fat has to come out, has to go somewhere, right? I mean, the whole goal is to burn your fat reserve. So we have to get the cholesterol out somehow. So it has to go through this thing called the liver, okay? It comes to the liver. And if you don't have enough liver function or you don't have enough bile for some reason, let's say you don't have a gallbladder, or let's say you have a fatty liver and you're not producing enough bile, then you may have a little backup of cholesterol. So the more bile you have, the easier it is for your body to get rid of this excess cholesterol. But even the fact that your cholesterol is high and you don't have the bile to break it down or get rid of it as fast as you would like, realize if you went to do an advanced lipid profile test and you found that you have high LDL, there's a couple different types of LDL, and you're going to find that the high LDL that you have is the large particle size. It's not the small, dense type of LDL. So the small, dense type is the dangerous one. You're not going to find that. You're only going to find that if you're doing high carbs, okay? So I wouldn't worry about it, but if you are concerned, you can do the test and you can see for yourself. And I included a video of my own wife having high LDL, and I explained that thoroughly. Now, the other thing that I want to mention, which is the icing on the cake, or well, I probably shouldn't talk about cake, but when you do intermittent fasting and keto together, within 14 days, 50% of the fat in your liver is going to be gone. That is huge. That is exciting. As long as you don't eat that icing on the cake, of course. All right, a couple other things that I want to show you about this fasting thing. Green tea, very, very, very awesome to drink through the day because green tea helps insulin resistance, okay? It'll allow you to fast longer. Now, there's other types of tea or herbs that are in tea that are also really good for blood sugars that will help reduce appetite, like green tea will, like cinnamon tea, using the herb Garcinia, ginseng, ginger are all really good to lower your appetite. So that's just an extra little tip. If you exercise, okay, I'm going to recommend you not do any type of pre-workout drink with a carbohydrate or even protein. I wouldn't recommend any post-drink or taking any amino acids while you're working out, before or after. Why? Because here you are, you just worked out and you created this amazing effect with growth hormone. And as soon as you start eating something, you basically kind of nullify a lot of those results, especially if it's carbohydrate and even if it's protein, okay? You're doing some protein powder. So realize as far as the nutrients around that exercise, especially amino acids, you're going to get enough amino acids from the meals, okay? So you don't have to worry about putting back these amino acids because really most of them tend to even just turn to sugar like the branch amino acids. So I wouldn't recommend eating around that exercise. Keep your fasting consistent, okay? The other point I want to bring up is supplements. When people fast, a lot of times they have symptoms like keto fatigue, keto flu, they might get cramps, they might have thyroid symptoms. All that means is that you're probably deficient in certain nutrients because the demand for certain nutrients go higher, and maybe you haven't been eating nutrient-dense foods for a while. So what you need to do is just make sure you just take B vitamins, natural ones. I recommend nutritional yeast and electrolytes. And I would recommend an electrolyte powder that also has trace minerals. I'll put a link down below of the one that I recommend. That way you can get the trace minerals and the electrolyte minerals with high amounts of potassium, which is going to help you. Potassium is needed in large amounts in the body. I'm talking like 4,700 milligrams. So sometimes if you can't do a lot of salad, this is a good little backup plan. But if you do the supplements, okay, with intermittent fasting and especially prolonged fasting, you can easily avoid keto fatigue, keto flu, thyroid symptoms. All right, so now let me just cover a couple mistakes that people make. A small snack. Let's say you're doing keto and you're on a roll. I'm just going to fast all day long. So instead of doing the fasting and waiting to your big meal, I'm just going to do maybe a little snack just to kind of push me through, thinking that doing a little snack or lower calories is going to get me by and I'll be fine with that. But realize that these snacks, especially the protein ones, like if you did like a scoop of peanut butter, for example, what's going to happen is you're going to spike insulin. It's a protein. Protein triggers insulin. Not as much as carbs, but it will. And then guess what? About an hour and a half, you're going to be hungry. It's going to throw you off your plan. So there's really only two things that won't stimulate insulin: fiber and fat. Protein will. So if you have to snack on something, do either pure fat, as in like MCT oil, okay, or that bulletproof coffee, or fiber, something very fibrous, like celery, for example, without the peanut butter, or some greens, okay? Now, some of you are going like, I'm not going to do that because that's not very pleasurable, but I'm just telling you that a mistake that people make is doing this little protein snack. As I interview people and find out why it's not working, I find out I'm sort of doing keto with a couple little snacks for the day and that type of thing. So just realize that that's why your results are not going to be where you need to be them. I'm just bringing this up as a point. These small snacks are a killer, okay? Even if they're healthy. Okay, the next little thing that I want to bring up is that the awareness of a little bit of carb and what that does to the state of ketosis. If you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to get into a really good fasting state, and you're going along, and let's say at night I'm just going to do a little wine. It's not many calories, whatever. Or let's say during the day you're going to do just like one piece of bread. What you have to realize is that a little bit of carb can block you as far as knocking you out of ketosis for a good amount of time. Half a glass of wine could knock you out of ketosis for 24 hours. A couple drinks on the weekend, that whole weekend, you're not going to be burning any fat or you're not going to be in ketosis. Just realize that. I'm not telling you not to do it. I'm just the messenger giving you the information that if you do it, don't be surprised if the results are not what you want them to be, okay? Because sometimes people are just thinking of calories. They're not looking at the hormone effects of different types of food. All right, the next point I want to bring up is this idea that it's all going to happen really quick. Maybe you have a friend or a family member that does this and it happens really quick for them, but for you, it's not happening. I had a guy that did my program many years ago. I didn't really educate him that well. And he says, yeah, your program didn't work. I says, what do you mean? Yeah, I did it for 2 weeks and it didn't work. I says, what happened? Well, it did work for 2 weeks, but then I stopped doing it, but then it didn't keep working. I'm like, what? I said, this is not a short-term thing where it's just going to fix your weight problem. Now you can go back to your old plan. This is like a lifelong change, a new lifestyle process or habit that you need to do consistently for the rest of your life, okay? And that was something that I just needed to educate him on because of this point. The number of years that an average person has eaten poorly, and I'm including myself in this group, has been a long time, okay? We've developed this condition called insulin resistance. It's become very, very chronic, okay? It's a bad problem. And the time it takes to fix it is much greater than what you may think. The level of effort is going to be a lot more than what you think. So you want to give it time. You don't want to focus on just the weight. You want to focus on the appetite, energy, cognitive improvements, decreased inflammation. That means it's working because you're creating your health. So this is why you have to have patience. This is why we call you a patient. And this is why we have also a waiting room. Last point I want to bring up, this false piece of information that we've been told so many times, everything in moderation, just a little bit is fine, there's no bad food, just keep everything in balance. It's all about balance. No, that is not true. When you're trying to get healthy, you don't want to balance everything. There's things that are really important and there's things that are trivial, not very important at all. What I'm showing you here is the most important thing you can do for your health out of anything, and that is fasting. And I'm also showing you the food that you need to avoid the most, which is a carbohydrate, and the other foods that you can eat in higher amounts, like fat. And there is one food that you want to eat in moderation, and that's protein, right? So to get someone healthy, they're already in an out of balance state, okay? So to put more balance and just balance everything out and eat a little bit of everything is the worst advice that anyone can give you. So I've just given you the things that you should focus the most of your attention on when getting healthy. And now your next step is to learn on what to eat. And that's in this video right here. Check it out.